All right, now that we got through the boring setup of this course and we got all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right in and let's start actually digitally painting. So I typically like to start my courses off with a fun project, but a little bit more of a complicated project that will challenge you. I'm just gonna kind of run through the process of painting a human eye, and you're just gonna have to follow along. If it doesn't turn out as good as mine, don't feel bad. But by the end of this course, you should improve your skills. And this is a good way to gauge that, is if you draw this eye with me now and paint it, and then at the end of the course, once you learn everything we teach you, go ahead and take those skills, apply them back to this lecture and repaint this eye, and you should see a pretty big improvement in your painting. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to draw the outline for our eye. So what we need to do is we first need to add a new layer. So that way we're not actually drawing on our background. We can keep our drawing and our background separate. Then we want to make sure that we're painting with the right type of brush. So if we come over here and we look at our brushes, we want to select a brush that is hard and round, but we also want the opacity to go up and down depending on how hard we're pushing with our stylus. So this hard round pressure opacity brush will work perfect. So you'll see if I click on it and I draw on my screen, you'll see that when I'm not pushing very hard, it's pretty opaque and it doesn't look as dark as my color, which you can see right over here. But if I push harder, it becomes more opaque. And that's exactly what we want. What we can also do is we can come into our brush settings and we can just bring down the hardness of the edge of that brush to about, let's say 95%, just so the edge of that is a little bit softer. And now we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to bring my brush size down just a tiny bit because this is a drawing, it's not a painting, so we can keep our brush size pretty small. So maybe even smaller than that. Something like that will probably work good. And the first thing we want to do is we want to draw the iris. We always start the eye drawing with the iris. So we're just going to basically just draw a nice simple circle like this. And one pointer is that when you're drawing circles, make sure that you're drawing from your shoulders. Make sure you're making the rotation come from your shoulder and not from your wrist. Make sure your whole arm is moving in that circular motion. That's going to help a nice rounder circle come out. So once we draw that circle, next we want to do is we want to add in the pupil. So the pupil is just going to be another circle within this circle. We want to make sure that it's right in the center. This pupil should typically be about 1/3 of the size of the iris circle. But it's really up to you. Depending on what kind of lighting situation this eye is in, is really going to determine how big your pupil is. So if there's a flashlight shining right in the eye, the pupil is going to get much smaller. And if your pupil is in a darker situation, the pupil will get much larger to let in more light into the eye. So it's really up to you how big you want to make this. For now, let's just make it about 1/3 of the size of the iris. So once we have that drawn in, next what we want to do is we want to draw in the eyelids. Now, a lot of people, when they draw eyelids, they have a hard time drawing the actual shape. It's a little bit of a complicated shape, but let's break it down into some simple lines and curves. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add in a guideline. A guideline is going to help us keep track of where we are in the shape of the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer on top of this, so that way we can delete this guideline layer later because we don't actually want it to be a part of our drawing. And what I'll do is I'm going to draw a line right here starting at the bottom of the eye. Now you can just draw this by hand if you want, but since we're working digitally, it'll be better if we just actually hold down Shift or whatever program you're in, whatever you need to do to create a straight line. We're going to use that process in order to draw a straight line just like this. So I can just draw a straight line that's perfectly straight just like that by holding down Shift in Photoshop. And now we can use this as a guide for the shape of our eyelids. So how do we use this as a guide? Well, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the tear duct, let's say it's on this side, we want to make sure that it's below this line. So the tear duct should be down here. And then the corner of the eye on the opposite side should be above this line by just a little bit. So we want to keep that in mind while we're drawing the eyelid. So the first thing we want to start off with is the top of the eyelid. We want to make sure that we cut off a little bit of the iris at the top like this. We'll just draw a straight, simple line like that. And the reason for this is if you have this higher up like this and you're showing any white of the eye, or even just have it right there at the very top, touching the top of the iris, it's going to make the person look very surprised or scared. And we don't really want that for this drawing. So we want to avoid that. So that's why we have this line kind of droop over the top of the iris. And the iris, by the way, is just the colored part of the eye. Next, let's go ahead and we're going to connect a line coming down like this. It's just going to be kind of curved like that, but almost straight. And that'll come down into the tear duct, which if you remember, we want the tear duct right here underneath this line. And the tear duct is just kind of a pointy shape, just like that. Then we can go ahead and do this line over here on the opposite side. And this one's going to be very similar to the one over here. The only difference is that it's going to be more stretched out. So as you can see, the top eyelid is kind of broken up into two lines. We have this short curved line right here, and then we have a longer curved line that kind of starts out flat and then slowly curves down into this corner of the eye. And if you remember, we want to make sure that this corner of the eye is a little bit higher than this line. So even though I met this line right here at this corner, we want to probably put the actual corner of the eye somewhere right there. So we'll go ahead and start the corner right about there. And what we want to do is we want to bring this down in a nice curve. We want to show a little bit of the white of the eye underneath the iris. So we just want to do a curve like that. And then as we get over here, we can kind of just create either a straight line or kind of a curve that curves in the opposite direction, just like that. So just real quick, let's re-break down the eyelid lines. So we have this curved line right here. That's just a nice short curved line that comes to right about there on the iris. And then this line just goes flat and then starts to curve down. And then we want to make sure that this corner is above this guideline. And then this right here is just one big round curve, which then slowly starts to either go straight. We can make this a straight line, or in some eyes, it starts to curve up more. And then we just kind of get this rounded point right here for the tear duct right underneath our guideline. Let's go ahead and add in our tear duct. So just draw a line like that. And I actually just realized that we drew our eye on the guideline layer. So we completely negated the point of adding in that layer, but that's okay. We'll just go ahead and take the eraser and we're just going to erase away that guideline. It's not going to be that big of a deal because this is just a drawing, an underdrawing for a painting. So you're not really going to see any of this drawing anyways. We're just going to use it as a guide. And then I'll go ahead and just re-clean that up a little bit. All right, great. Now let's hurry up and finish this drawing up. All we want to do is just want to add a ledge to our bottom eyelid. Typically, you're going to see a nice ledge on that bottom eyelid. You don't see it as much with the top eyelid because it's either covered up by eyelashes or the angle that you're looking at the eye doesn't give you that vantage point. So there you go. So that ledge is just going to basically be another line that follows the same line as this one right here at the bottom of the eyelid. And then we can do the top eyelid. So we want to just kind of create something, a line like this. The top eyelid is basically going to follow the edge of the top eyelid. And this is basically just kind of the crease between the actual skin of the eyelid that wraps around the eyeball and the actual brow bone underneath the skin. It's just something kind of like that. Perfect. And then we can go ahead and we can add just a few wrinkles underneath here like that. I don't know if we'll add those in the painting, but let's just add them in for now, just in case we decide we want to. We can also kind of sketch in a light. This is actually the tear duct. This part right here has a different name. This is the tear duct, but we'll just call both these the tear duct for now. Now what we want to do is we want to add just a little bit of shading in here just to use as a guide in our next painting, or once we start painting this. So what we want to do is we want to add a little bit of shading here. And to add shading in, just don't push as hard with your stylus. You want to just push lightly and lightly shade in this area. Now actually, let's go ahead and bring our brush size up because that'll make shading much easier. So we'll bring it up to about that size and we can just slowly shade that in like this. Now we don't have to get super complicated with this. This is just to use as a guide and just to help us understand the form of this eye drawing a little bit better before we start painting it. Add a shadow right here. The top eyelid and the bottom eyelid, they're actually pretty thick, so we want to make sure that we have some shadow being cast from underneath them. And that includes this top eyelid casting a shadow on this bottom eyelid right there. We can go ahead and fill this in. Darken this top area like this. We also want to shade in this side of the top eyelid and this side. All right, perfect. So there you go. So we basically have our drawing ready to go now. Now, since we drew these on 2 different layers because we had that, we accidentally drew on our guide layer, what we want to do is we want to just select both of these layers and merge them together. If you're not following right along with me, hopefully you didn't make that mistake. Hopefully you saw my mistake and you don't make that. But if you didn't, you need to go ahead and just merge these layers together. So now those are all one layer. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. Thanks for joining me in this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.